Hello, everyone. Welcome to our conversation this morning. My name is Jeff Serra, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. The panel focus this morning is a discussion on how affordable homeownership empowers families to achieve their financial goals.
Jeff, she's saying to start over.
When?
It says wait for go.
Now go.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our conversation this morning. My name is Jeff Serra, and I'll be the moderator for today's panel. The focus of the panel this morning is a discussion around how affordable homeownership empowers families to achieve their financial goals, the impact affordable housing has on the fabric of our communities, and what we can do as private citizens, government lawmakers, and small and large businesses to come together and wrestle with the challenges of affordable housing. The panel members joining me this morning are three well-known Austinites, distinguished guests, and Habitat board members. They're passionate about affordable housing, and they each have a unique perspective. First panel member is Yvette Boatwright, founder of Realty Austin, one of the leading real estate brokerage firms in Central Texas. Her firm has come together over the years to build 9 houses for hardworking families with Habitat. Our second panel member is Joe Bland, founder and CEO of Joe Bland Construction, a company that not only has a reputation for quality construction, but also a company who has donated countless hours and expertise to nonprofits all over Central Texas. And finally, Terry Mitchell, founder of Momark Development, one of the leading residential developers in Austin, and a man who is passionate about creating solutions to tackle the challenges of affordable housing in Austin. I want to kick it off this morning with a few data points just to kind of frame some of the issues that we face and put them in numbers that we can understand. Since 2012, the cost of land in Austin has risen by nearly 70%, 70%. The cost of construction materials has also risen at a high rate, leading the median family home price in Austin doubling over the past 10 years to $435,000. From 1965 to 2020, the median home price divided by the median income, which is a measure of affordability, has gone from 2.9 times to 4.5 times. Simply put, incomes have steadily risen at a slower rate than housing costs. Since 1991, 45,000 fewer housing units have been created in the Austin MSA than demand, which is leading to a shortage. And finally, 36% of all jobs are located in an area that represent 1.8% of the land area for the Austin MSA, a shocking number. So let's turn to our panel for a second and let's see if we can come up with some helpful solutions. So I'm going to kick it off with this sort of question from each of your unique perspectives. What do you think are the contributing factors to the affordable housing problem we face in Austin? And I'll start off the question by asking Yvette to start the conversation.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Well, as you said, if the $435,000 is the average price for a home in Austin right now, that is way beyond the median family income earner can afford. And if you want to put that into perspective, the monthly payment for a home at $435,000 is $2,922, and that's after you put down 20%, which is $89,000. Again, of a whole year's wages for a median family income earner. So that's just incredible. Even prices in the suburbs are skyrocketing, and the price of development, land, and lumber increases, which I'll let my colleagues here impart their wisdom on, is through the roof. So from a resale perspective, it's already a slugfest. We have multiple offers. We have over asking price offers, and this is just not sustainable for affordability as Austin continues to grow.
Thank you, Yvette. Joe, Terry?
Well, in my
in my area of expertise as a civil contractor that does water and wastewater improvements, builds streets and highways, I've seen enormous increases in the design standards and the requirements that that we do, you know, the usable life of the product that we're building. The municipalities are wanting to extend from a 30-year product to a 50-year, 60-year product. They don't have the money to maintain in their budgets to maintain the aging infrastructure, so they're trying to push that out. And I get that, but that flies right in the face of the idea of an affordable home. If you know, we'd almost have to think about relaxing standards for affordability in order to have the streets and the infrastructure that are similar probably to the streets and the infrastructure that were in the homes that we live in, that was built 30 or 40 years ago. And to those design standards, to be able to impact that. It's important to note that the cost of infrastructure goes into the lot cost. And the lot cost is historically 20 to 25% of the total cost of a home. So of your $435,000 median home, $107,000 or $108,000 of that is the land and the lot cost. And if the infrastructure cost, you know, as that infrastructure cost goes up and that lot cost goes up, it's a multiple of 4 to 5 times, possibly in some instances, you know, 3 times to get, but it's a multiple of the cost of the end product. So it's a terrific impact, and it's the old adage of how do you eat the elephant, you know, one bite at a time. You know, simple things like, think with me about ADA standards, which we're all keen to. We want accessibility for disabled people throughout our city, throughout our infrastructure. But we live in a topography of rolling hills and limestone outcroppings, and those areas don't lend themselves to a less than 5% slope and less than 2% cross slope. And so when you start building an entire subdivision, planting an entire 100 and 200 acre plot of land that's going to be accessible without steps, you know, it really gets to be a challenge. And so we start off by moving hundreds of thousands of yards of dirt and rock to lunar landscape the topography to get it flat enough to where we can build an entire development without steps. And I get that. Trust me, I don't want it to be considered disparaging against the disabled, but you've got to recognize that that's one of the costs that we're having to overcome that is impacting affordable housing.
Thank you, Joe. Terry, what is your perspective on this issue?
Well, it's thank you for letting me be here. I would say that, you know, the problem of affordable housing is not just a single side, it's multifaceted. And Yvette talked about a supply and demand imbalance, which is true. And it's both at the micro level, meaning the concentration of jobs downtown, and then we don't provide a corresponding a number of housing units close to that core, to the overall just general undersupply over time, which you mentioned is about 45,000 units or so. And Joe is right. Every time there is a code change, and the reasons are always valid, there's no complaint there, that's not absorbed by the developer or the builder, that is passed along to the consumer. All right? And those are very valid reasons, but there's also a fundamental reason. So I want us to kind of take a step back and go to the 20,000 foot level. This is what I'm about to say is a nationwide problem, and it's also an Austin problem. And what I mean by that is there is a fundamental thing. It's been going on since the 60s. I'm old enough to have lived through the 60s as a child, and we were talking about, there were articles back in the 60s about it was going to take 2 incomes to buy a home, not just one, and what were we going to do with these latchkey kids, and, you know, there's going to be a breakdown in the moral fabric of our society. Well, now two incomes don't provide enough income to buy a house. My point is saying is that trend has been going on for a long time. And it's the two, if you were looking at a graph, you have house prices going up faster than inflation. And then for a large portion of our society, we have incomes that are flat. And so that gap is growing. And nationwide, the median home price for a home is about $310,000, $320,000, and the median household income is $61,000. That tells you right there that over half of our households, if they don't own a home today, they're never going to, unless they start earning more money. And so it's a fundamental issue. It's a nationwide problem, and it actually becomes more acute in an area like Austin that's growing fast, because a lot of our jobs are not software engineers making a six-figure income. They're the folks working at Target and Walmart, and largest employer in Texas, Walmart. Largest employer in something like 26 states, Walmart. And those are not $100,000 a year jobs on average. And so we have this flat income and growing costs. And so as a developer, when you analyze this and bring it all down to its basic, how do I fix this? What do we do? Developers have two tools, at least we can get subsidies from the government, we can issue bonds, we can do tax credits, and all of those do a little bit, but they don't provide, when you start running the numbers, you can't supply 70% of our housing that way. There's not enough money. So what do I have to do? And I have two tools, and that's I can increase the density, and two, I can make the units smaller. And I want to pull up a little slide here if someone would help me do that. I haven't changed this slide because it kind of tells a story in and of itself, but I was in a zoning case in 2008, and we were looking at about 10 acres, and we were going to do some condos. It was about 2 miles from downtown, and we were trying to provide, the median home price in that area at the time was about $475,000, $450,000. And we were going through a zoning case, and we wanted to increase the density, make the units smaller. And at the time, the initial sentiment from the community was, no, we want to do single family. And so the first column, when you look at that, if we had done single family, and by the way, in 2008, the interest rates were 6.75%, seems astronomical today. At the time, we thought it was a good interest rate, but the lot cost would have been about $160,000, and the sales price of the home on average, some a little bit smaller, but some bigger, would have been about $475,000. Putting down the minimum payment, and Yvette said a minute ago, if you put down 20%, your cost was X. In my experience, the great majority of folks, I just did a condo project where the median home price is about $450,000, and probably 90% of the buyers put down less than 10%. They have the income to cover it. So with this calculation, somebody putting down a minimum down payment here, doing a 95% loan, they would need an income of $173,000 to afford that $475,000 house. Now that would be different today because interest rates are different, but the house price would also be higher. If you go over and look at the middle column, that was what we ended up getting the zoning for 123 units. And the land cost would have then been 87. And that's just taking all the fixed costs that we pay Joe, we pay the landowner, and we divide it by the number of units, and that's what you get. Because we had more units, we could lower that cost. We could then make the lot cost smaller because we have to meet that ratio that Joe's talking about of 20 to 25%. Urban can get up to a third. And we would sell a home for about $240,000, which means we could make it smaller, but now we were reaching people making $89,000. If we wanted to maximize the affordability, we would have been doing about 30 units an acre, and you would see that next to last column, the land cost was about $35,000 a unit. The unit cost would have been about $166,000. It would have been about 1,000 square foot unit, and we would have been reaching people making $63,000. So my point being is that's just density and square footage. We make the units smaller as we put more units on there, but we have more units to spread a lot of those fixed costs over, and that lowers the price. So that's essentially what my business is today, by the way. I used to, 15 years ago, 95% of my work was single family. Today, 95% of my work is either condos, trying to bring the price down, or doing rental, which even gets lower then because people who couldn't afford a condo price. Thank you.
Great.
Terry, that's a really, interesting comparison of the levers that you have as a developer to try to create more affordability. What I heard from the panel of this kind of major factors, land and infrastructure obviously being big factors, and the fact that a lot of infrastructure is being pushed down from what used to be provided by the utilities, public utilities, and now is being required of the developer to do, which is increasing, the cost of actually bringing a lot to be ready to be built on. I heard Yvette talk about supply and demand issues with regard to the housing market, and some of that being driven by just the demand of influx of people, but also low interest rates and a lack of actual supply that's been created over the years. I hear, density and square footage being a real critical element, and that's probably a regulatory, kind of approach that we could use some help on. And I also think that, transportation and infrastructure for transportation, and this whole idea of not pulling everybody into one central place to work, where 36% of our jobs are within 2% of our land mass, and figuring out how to create more technology solutions around remote working and maybe creative transportation infrastructure issues. There are some things that we can't do much about, which is creating more income for people. That's a more difficult thing to address, but there are some things that looks like the factors that are here, and I'd like to shift the conversation a little bit and see if we can kind of suggest some things, some solutions or some ways that citizens or businesses, nonprofits, local governments can kind of address these overarching issues, which all come together in a pot to create this difficult situation. So I'll again start with Yvette and ask Yvette to offer some potential ways that we can help.
I'm happy to share our journey. It was about 9 years ago that we challenged our agents to commit a portion of their commission with each transaction into a charitable contribution fund, so that, among other things, we could build a home with Austin Habitat for Humanity. So again, 9 years later, our agents have risen to the occasion every year and not only contribute the funds to build a home, they volunteer alongside the homeowner every fall, and they excitedly show up for 10 weeks, put on their hard hats and build right alongside this future homeowner that just has a dream of safety and stability. At Realty Austin, we know that we have the luxury of helping people find their dream home. So we made it our pledge to find ways that help Austinites find safe and affordable places to call home. Mm-hmm. So in addition to Austin Habitat for Humanity, we work with foundation communities, which is affordable rental units. We've worked with Community First Village for the formerly homeless, and we work with the Safe Austin Children's Shelters. So I think we're a true example of what you can do when you pull your resources together and then make sure that you share them with our community.
And Yvette, that's amazing to hear, and I know that you also benefit in your company in terms of what you're creating as a culture. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so our mantra at Realty Austin is work hard, play hard, and give back. And that's exactly what we do. We provide opportunities for our agents to give back in all sorts of ways throughout the year. And I mean, it's really what fills our cup. Again, we do supper clubs at the different communities. We are always, of course, giving back in back to school drives for the different organizations. And yeah, I mean, we just have a culture, we actually have a culture of abundance. And so that's where we come from, in that, again, we raised about $250,000 every year for the last 9 years to be able to give back. And we give back really smartly, actually, when, now we're only building a home for a homeowner here, but with foundation communities, we do the match fund at their annual fundraiser. And that helps raise over $1 million. So we always tell our agents that we are tripling, quadrupling their impact with every dollar that they contribute.
It's great, Yvette. I've seen your folks out there, and really you've done an amazing job with your people and connecting them to the missions of our local communities. Joe, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to press a little bit on some of these factors that we talked about, that you talked about specifically with, pushing down, the utility used to do certain work, and now the developer has to, and the infrastructure has to. Talk about what some recommendations or some suggestions that you might have for, how that might be done differently. And I know you work with the city and you have to have a good relationship, and I'm not trying to point fingers, but maybe there are some suggestions that you have that could help streamline that and make it a little bit easier for a developer to kind of bring a lot to ready build condition.
Mm-hmm. Well, I honestly, and I don't fault the city for having to have construction standards and specifications that are, somewhat one size fits all. But when you've got an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives by relaxing your standards and allowing homes to be built that are affordable for probably a lot of your city workforce. A lot of those people that are driving the garbage trucks and working in the water and wastewater plants, the people that are in the accounting offices, the city employees they're falling directly into that slot of unaffordability. And so they're having to drive to buy. By that I mean they're going to have to go far enough to get away from the high cost of construction and the high cost of real estate to buy and to live and then commute. And that's just exacerbating the problem. So I think that, there really needs to be some conscious thought to the fact that maybe we can relax some of these design standards and let affordability have a break. We've got a minimum size of simple things. Minimum size of a water service in Austin's 1.5 inches. Well, I can go down to Comal County and build homes with single water service that are 3/4, half that size. And you think, well, that's not a lot of money, except for when you put together that service, it's about $800 or $900 difference. And that $800 or $900 difference, then with a multiple of 4, all of a sudden we spent $3,500 to $3,600 on a house. And I'm talking about an affordable house that's, 1,200 feet, 1,400 square feet, not a 3,500 square foot home, So there needs to be some thought given to, well, what can we do to downsize the infrastructure to where affordability can be. We've got other counties and cities, municipalities that design to a lesser standard in the flood capacity within their streets and their infrastructure. Well, if you want to get the 100-year storm out of your streets, like we do in Travis and Central Texas, due to the topography and the rainfall amounts, you're putting massive amounts of drainage pipe, under the streets and numerous inlets to capture that water and get it off that street. So we're driving on an unflooded street in a 100-year storm. You can travel south to Comal County and they design for a 25-year storm to be out of the street, and for the 100-year storm to actually be carried between the curbs. Well, that does present a problem. You're not going to be able to drive 60 miles an hour down a street that's flooding in that. But I mean, those are just the types of differences that can be made that we could think through, and that would save on the infrastructure cost. But it's a combination of a lot of moving pieces. Terry makes a really good point. You know, if you'll just consolidate and bring those homes closer together and put more per acre, then you've got that component, and then you've got the construction standards and the buildability and topography that changes. You know, there's little things we can all do, and I'd want to just kudos to you, Jeff, for I know you've done for Habitat, have donated land and provided properties that to be built on to afford affordable housing. And then Yvette, for 9 years, been out there slinging a hammer, leading her troops to help in those homes. And I would challenge every businessman on this call to think about building the kind of community within their organization that exists when you do show that you're more than just a balance sheet owner. You've got an opportunity to invest in your people or invest in the community, which is in turn an investment in your people in the culture. And Yvette can tell you that that's the surprise of being a philanthropist, where you're giving, and all of a sudden you in turn receive, and you see your everybody in the office giving each other attaboys, and they build a community. They laugh about, smashing their thumb with a hammer and dropping the 2x4 on their tennis shoe. And but that's such an important part of what businesses need to do. We can solve this problem. You think about the homes and the people and the wealth that's coming to Austin, but those dollars are missing their best used purpose by not being sown back into the community, by businesses not doing what they can do. I can't personally, our company, we built streets for Mobile Loaves and Fishes, and built, have community first. We built streets for Habitat, basketball courts for churches, and parking lots for churches. We've done lots of things, and I can assure you that it makes a difference in the people go home at night feeling as though they've participated in more than just a job and getting a paycheck. And that's really important.
Thank you, Joe. That is fantastic. And I appreciate what you've done in the community. I've seen it for years, and I congratulate you and your team as well. Terry, shifting over a little bit to you on some of the ideas, the factors that contribute, and in some ideas that you might have as to how your business can work with the city, the governmental agencies, to try to create change that would be positive and would impact affordability. What would you suggest some things that could be done?
A couple of things come to mind. Austin as a city, notwithstanding the fact that we have a very dense urban core of jobs, that was the reference that you were making of the concentration of jobs in our core, we're a relatively low density city. And if you were to get in a helicopter and fly over a city, you see lots and lots of just big surface parking lots. And I've often wondered, and if you were a large company and you had a big surface parking lot, I wish there was a mechanism at the city to say, hey, we're going to take this parking lot and we're going to leave the parking. No, the parking's required, but we're going to put above that. We want to expedite some approvals, and we want to provide 50, 60, 70, 100, whatever units of housing on top of that parking lot, and reserve them for homeowner or people at certain income levels. And you then begin, in many cases, you would be serving the lower income employees that you have yourself. But if not, you're serving people who work in that general area. And because there's no land cost, because the land is already there, you've taken out that cost that Joe has referred to, a large portion of that, and you're putting housing right there on top of it, and putting housing where jobs are. You're taking out the land cost, therefore the cost ought to be less. If you're doing a few stories and adding some density, that allows it to further reduce the cost. but it's also one of those things too. And I'll give you an example. If you live close to your work, you may not, if you're a couple, you may not need 2 cars, you may just need 1. And so, with the average cost of owning a vehicle about $9,000 a year, somebody gets a $9,000 a year raise that might contribute toward housing because the house is close to where the work is. And so I would love to see some, whether it's some sort of incentive that the city did, some streamlining of approvals to allow that. I'll give you an example. Years ago, I went to downtown Philadelphia. I went there 30 years ago to interview for some job. Actually, our law firm was interviewing some folks, and I was told not to go downtown because it was not safe. And so I didn't go downtown. And then about 25 years later, I'm going to visit some folks in Philadelphia, and they say, hey, let's go downtown. And it was completely transformed. And so when they asked the question why, the city wanted to stimulate folks living downtown. It's just one example. And so they reduced the real property tax requirements or the tax burden. I don't exactly know what it was, if there were conversions from office to housing. And they had 60,000 people living downtown that didn't live there 10 years before. So what would happen if we said, hey, if you'll take your surface parking lot, we'll reduce your taxes for a few years or something, if you'll start providing some affordable housing there. I bet there's a lot of businesses will begin to think about that and say, hey, how could we do that and make some contribute back to the community in that way. That's one area. The other is when I say to lower the cost of housing, you need to make the units smaller and increase the density. We all think, our minds go, you can't live in less than 2,000 square feet. You need, all this other stuff. Well, the average home in 1959 was 900 square feet, and the average household size was 3.5 people, not 2.5 as it is today. So it's like, we made it work. We can do this. It's our perceptions. And so I want to dispel that we can live in a smaller environment that does, you do need to do things, create community gathering places and things like that. But when I'm saying we need to increase the density, I'm not saying everywhere. I'm not saying that, every next door we need to put up a 5-story apartment project next to your single family home, but we have tons of areas in our city that are underutilized. And it would make sense to try to utilize those areas. A city is like a living being. It changes over time. We now have this heavy concentration of jobs in our urban core. And so people want to be as close as they can to work. And therefore the prices get bid up because in that close-in environment, there's far more demand than there is supply. What would happen if we looked at a region and say, where can we add housing in this area to help alleviate that? How can we do that and do so in a sensitive area that preserves the neighborhood and yet provides housing for folks that couldn't otherwise live here? Most areas in the urban core, and I know Yvette has seen this, there's a lot of people that have lived there for 20 or 30 years and they end up having to sell their home because the cost of owning that home goes up over time. They don't have the option to move into another type of home because it's all a similar type and all of a relatively similar price. They'll have to move further away to find a home in the price range that they can afford on a fixed income or whatever. And it would be helpful to provide in every area a range of product to serve the full society.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I know that I've seen this work, in terms of deciding to move the work where people live as opposed to move the people to go to work where the work happens to be in a central location. So for instance, HomeAway, I'm familiar with their model at one point, and I don't know if they still do it, but they had work hubs, office hubs around the city, and they basically built these offices to be where their people live. And so you could be in the marketing department and live at the Domain, and you have somebody that lives in the south side of town and they're working at Penfield, and they were still in the marketing department. And technology enables us to do that. I think we found during the pandemic that we're actually, it's not perfect, but it's better than we may have thought in terms of how we connect people with technology and allow remote working and those kinds of things. And so there's some ideas about sort of pulling apart the downtown and making multiple downtowns to where you're building the workplaces where people can live and where it's more affordable to live and spreading things out. I think those are some solutions you could bring to the table as well, to help the situation. Because I think transportation, if we're just going to focus on building more roads so get more people downtown, or building more rail to get more people downtown, you're not really fixing the housing situation. You're just moving more jobs into that 2% of the land area, and that isn't really going to kind of move the needle. But I think some of these ideas are really interesting, and I think some of them require people like, Terry and Joe to be, in front of zoning people and City of Austin people and trying to working with them and talking to them about some of the ways to customize some of these building codes and zoning regulations to be more smart about it as opposed to one size fits all. And it does take a lot of work to do that, and that's a higher level kind of discussion. But as Yvette said, and as Joe said, and even in my own company, there are some individual things we can do that move the needle if we just all do a little. And so I really think that's also something that we shouldn't be lost on all of us. So we've talked a little bit about how individually we've contributed, or you've contributed to the community. I think it's very interesting to hear some of the things that have been done. I will say that when you talk about land in what that problem is for us in the City of Austin, I just wonder whether, if we were thinking more forward thinking about where the community is going to grow to and how we can create affordability, that owning land that is undeveloped, that is carved out for what we're trying to do in terms of creating these communities that can be more affordable and work live type communities, that maybe there's some opportunity for the city to be a landowner in a way that they haven't done in the past. Yvette mentioned the land I bought at Scenic Point. I really bought it to donate it when Habitat needed it, and when the city would come and partner with Habitat to build the infrastructure there. But that was way ahead of, I had no idea that it would be worth what it was by the time it was donated, because the land had gone up so much in price. But you can get ahead of that if you're just forward thinking about it, and I encourage people to think about that as well. I want to shift gears a little bit and kind of dig in a little bit more about Habitat, and specifically the organization that we're all board members of and that this panel is being sponsored by. That sometimes people get confused, and think about Habitat and say, oh, well, they just build houses and give them away. That's really great. What a great organization. And that, I hear that a lot, and so is that true? How does it really work, Yvette?
Oh, I mean, the Habitat homeowner is just like you and me. They have to qualify for a house. And if they don't, they do financial counseling at Habitat. But it's actually way more. The Habitat homeowner has to put in 300 hours of sweat equity, which means they are working alongside a lot of these volunteers, not only on their own home, but on the homes of others. And, when I say that the homeowners are just like you and me, they are hardworking Austinites who just have a glimmer in their eye and the love in their heart to make homeownership possible for them and their families. And what's wonderful is that we get to meet the children too. Usually at the beginning, the children have hopes and dreams just like yours and my children do. They can imagine a better life, and they have safety and stability in their future home. Just from the wall raising day one to the traditional board cutting ceremony at the dedication at the very end, we hear firsthand how this new home will help change their lives. And of course, that just makes it all worthwhile.
Yes, Joe, how have you, what attracted you to Habitat as a place to spend your time and donate your time to help the organization? What about it is you found interesting and invaluable?
Well, I think it goes I think you have to recognize the fact that Habitat has been in the Austin area for 35 years, serving Austinites, building homes for people that of lower income that need to have the same home to live in that higher income people have that inherent need to be a homeowner, to have a place that you can call home, that is your where you can get comfort and rest and feel secure. That's part of who we are. And that nature, that desire is great for people of lower income as it is for of higher income. And what drew me to Habitat was, the long-standing reputation of meeting the needs for the less fortunate. I have 300 people that work for me, and they're all these are carpenters and construction laborers, pipe fitters, equipment operators. They don't make the kind of money. Our industry doesn't provide for that. We're in a competitive bid industry, so we have to be the low bidder in 98% of the instances of the work that we get, and that doesn't lend itself to paying exorbitant wages. But those wages are, we've got to do more as a community to help those people that are of that they're the most wonderful, God-fearing, passionate about their families, and they work hard all day long and go home to be able to do something that contributes to their ability to have that home is just it's part of should be part of our core. And I know, Yvette, she'll attest to the fact that when you spread that desire that's within you to your workforce, it just increases productivity. They just become more interested because they're absolutely living out, the promise of, giving and being a cheerful giver, and the reward, the abundance that comes from doing that. We all feel that. We can't deny that. That's within our soul. And it's just great to be able to be a part of Habitat and be able to, having lived here all my life and sew back some of the what I've learned over the years in business and in life, to be able to put that back into an organization that is, like I said, 35 years running. That's an incredible track record.
It is. Terry, what drew you to Habitat, and what about its mission and the way it operates really appeals to you?
I love its passion for helping people find housing, and I've watched with just marvel through the years at how they've the difference they make family by family in providing housing. And I kind of fell into Habitat in a backward way, but Habitat has a division called Home Base, and I've talked about density and square footage, and I'm actually doing an affordable housing project I'll call it an experiment, but it's not an experiment. It's just working the kinks out. It's the test run. Joe helped us build the infrastructure, and now we're building units, and it's 88 condominium units, and Habitat through Home Base pre-qualifies the buyers and gets them qualified. They sign a contract, and then we start building the units. We have 32 units under construction. We have another 56 to build, and it's in an area where the median home price is about $370,000, and we're offering condominium units, homes from the 170s to the low 200s. And it's all of the buyers, with the exception of one or two, are well below, most of them are below 70% median family income. It warmed my heart the other day when they said that half of our buyers were single parents. And those are the people that get left behind because they don't have two incomes. They don't have the ability. And so the ability for them to own a home, put their child in a good school district, be relatively close to work, that just warms my heart. And the hope is that we kind of go through this density and square footage analysis, and Habitat is planning for some of that type of housing product in the future, because that's the future. That's the future for the bulk of our society, is going to be living in a little bit more dense environments, which, by the way, everybody in the world does except the United States. And so we're just following the world when we do that. But for me, it's, can we work on this product, figure that out, and provide a way that Habitat can provide more housing, more volume of housing to more people in the future. And they've been an incredible partner, and I just love working with them.
You know, I think a lot of people maybe don't know that there is some, you know, some home ownership benefits, not only financial, but security, and feeling that you have to worry about that apartment you're in being scraped and another building built, or that you have to move out, or that rent's going to be raised. There's a certainty that creates a comfort and a relaxation of a family into their home, and realizing that they can actually create the environment for their children, for their family, that is stable and steady and won't be taken away from them. And I think there's a huge security that really allows people to then free themselves from some of the stresses and concerns that, you know, this world brings to us every day. So I really think that's a very important part of this. In addition, you know, some of the things that Habitat has worked with the city on, et cetera, to create, you know, deed restricted housing where, you know, it'll always be in the inventory of affordable. If you create affordable housing and don't deed restrict it, it suddenly becomes unaffordable down the road. And because it'll go to the highest bidder. But if you deed restrict it, have income limitations, those things help, you know, keep the inventory of affordable housing from disappearing. You can build it, but if it disappears, you're not actually incrementally increasing it. So I think there's so many things that Habitat does in how they work to solve these issues and create public-private partnerships, like with your firm, Terry and Joe and Yvette and other firms, to kind of work together to make this happen. It's not a one-size-fits-all. I know from my own perspective, hammering nails next to the person who's going to live in that house is incredible. And it's like when you're back in the days of the settlers, where they go to a piece of land, they carve it out, and they say, okay, we're building the barn first, you know, and then we're going to build everybody's house together, and then that's going to be our community. And that brings people together. And just doing a little bit of that, you know, for a day or 2 days or 3 days with the homeowners really is incredible. And I'd like to ask any of you if you have any particular families or stories you want to tell about people that you worked alongside. Yvette, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, watching a home go from a slab in 10 weeks to a complete and finished home because of volunteers and the regs that show up alongside the homeowner is just amazing. I do have a very special memory. I mean, there's so many things that happen on that job site. But one is, I think from our 6th annual home build, Mr. Barigi, who, you know, he's a taxi driver. I mean, we have people that work at hotels, people who work at retirement communities, you know, they come from all walks of life. But Mr. Barigi, on that day, we started playing music just like we do on the job site. And we started playing Happy by Pharrell Williams. And we just started an impromptu dance party. And, you know, some of the lyrics of Happy say, clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. And it was just one of the most incredible days to just impromptu dance on the slab in Scenic Point.
Your team will never forget that, I'm sure.
No.
Joe or Terry, anything that strikes you as a particular situation, a family that you connected with, or anything that happened on the job site that you want to share?
I know when we went to a house raising at Scenic Point, or it was a it was I forget what Habitat was, what the event, they put a tent up in the cul-de-sac, and I remember one of the homeowners walked up and asked me what I did. And I said, well, I just happened to build, build these streets that are in front of your house. And I got the biggest hug, just impromptu, just a great big hug and a thank you for building your streets. You know what? Okay, but, our work pretty well goes unnoticed almost everywhere, but it didn't go unnoticed to that homeowner. They were appreciative of the curb and the asphalt and stuff that was in front of that house, just as they were the house that they had helped build and were living in.
Great, Joe. Terry, you have anything that comes to mind?
Probably about once a year, a homeowner will reach out and send us a little note about how they love their home or love their community or love whatever feature you happen to put in the home. And it's just that little bit of encouragement that says, okay, we're doing the right job. And my wife kids me a lot. She says, you're just living It's a Wonderful Life. You remember where Jimmy Stewart would hand the wine and hand the loaf to the family moving in the home. That's the feeling you get. The feeling you get when somebody moves into their home, their lives are changing in a very big way, and hopefully for a very positive way. And to me, it's just their sanctuary. It's the place they can go to. And I just love that sense of satisfaction that Joe describes when people are so appreciative of having a safe, secure home where they can raise their family and live their lives. And it's, it's not just young people. It's, I've had just as many compliments. I had an 83-year-old woman buy a 1-bedroom condo one time. And I said, 83, I'm not expecting her to live another 30 years, but she said, no, this is my sanctuary. And this is where I can live the remainder of my life in a safe, secure environment and share life with my neighbors and family. And I just couldn't get enough of it. I love that. So it's realizing that you're not building homes to make a profit. You have to stay in business, but you're building homes for families, and you're changing their lives. And if you put it near a school, their kids will benefit from that school. If you put it near amenities, features, parks, they get to use those parks, and it all means something. So it's a very much a reward when you do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've had several experiences too, but the one that continues to remind me of how wonderful this organization is we were building a home. Our company was building a home, as we do every year, and there was a woman who was working on the home, and we were kind of working together. And I knew she was going to be the homeowner. I don't usually see someone in there, maybe I can't recall, late 60s, early 70s, somewhere in there. And I was kind of like, wow, this is different, and I started talking to her, and her name was Dolores, and Dolores was my mother's name. And I immediately fell in love with this woman. She was just incredible. And I was talking to her about her story. What's her story? And she had 2 friends with her that were helping her on her house, and they weren't her sisters, they were her friends. And they play cards together at night. And they gathered together as a family all the time. And she had a grandson, and she really didn't have a place that she could take her grandson for an overnight or for a weekend. And she really loved her grandson. And she worked. She had a full-time job. She worked for the state, I believe. And she just was the most amazing woman. And I remember just being so connected to her because of who she was, but also because she has my mother's name. I couldn't resist it. And we've been friends ever since. And I see her. She's out at Scenic Point, and she's just a great lady. And I'll just never forget the time we spent together out there and hearing her story. So those are the things that really touch you when you get involved in this work. So we have a couple minutes left, and I'm just going to remind everybody that the Restore at Habitat, the first Restore in the country, was in Austin, Texas, on 4th and Kamal. And now, of course, you see it, the restore on Ben White, and you say, wow, we've come a long way, baby. But that was the first restore, and that has provided a tremendous amount of revenue for the organization to be able to create sustainability and long-term benefit. So I want to remind everybody about the restore. Make sure you come visit. A lot of cool stuff there. Donate if you have it, because you sell stuff there. I donated a hot tub that I bought. I bought a house. There was a hot tub there. I didn't want it. They picked it up, took it away. Next thing you know, they sold it for like $2,000. Hey, just think about that stuff. That's revenue to Habitat. In closing, I want to just have you all kind of give me one word. You don't have to say why you've given it, but what one word describes home to each of you? And I'll start with Yvette. What one word describes home to you?
Home to me is stability. It's a place where your dreams can truly flourish.
Joe?
I would say safety, a safe place that you can relax in and feel comfortable.
Terry?
I'd say love, because that's where you share life with your family and friends, and that's what love is.
And I love all those. Those would be all of mine as well. But I like the word settling. It's a place to settle. It's a place to settle so that you can stabilize, and then you can return back to your community yourself.
Yeah, a sanctuary brings a good concept, a good thought to mind.
Absolutely, refuge.
Wraps up the love and the safety and all in one.
Yep. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap this up now. We've got maybe a minute or two left. I just want to thank everybody who participated on this panel discussion. First of all, the contributors, who are really tremendous people. I want to also thank the people who joined to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we've encouraged you. I hope we've sparked some interest of things that you can do and ways you can contribute. I hope we've maybe put some ideas out there that someone will talk about and advance. I hope we've also connected you with our hearts to this organization we all love.
Yes.
And I hope that you all can participate in what Habitat does in some way, whatever way you feel comfortable and whatever way hits you. We all have an opportunity to give a hand up instead of a handout, which is very rewarding. It's not only rewarding for the receiver, but it's rewarding for the giver. And so I encourage you all to invest in that kind of an opportunity. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Deb.
everybody.
Thank
you.
fellow board members.